Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji.
Welcome back to the Deconstructed Woman with Alyssa Marie and Joji. Today we're going to be talking about double binds. And this topic occurred to me as I was watching an episode of Project Runway. And they actually, but through their sponsorship with Tresemme Beauty Products, did a interesting take on double binds. And their clothing project was based on two opposites. And this when I was watching the show, I just thought about double binds and how I haven't thought about that in a long time. And then as I watched the movie Barbie with my husband last weekend, America Ferrera did this monologue about what I quickly picked up was double binds. And I thought, wow, I think the universe is sending me this message about double binds. And that is something that we must have to talk about. And so Alyssa, do you have a concept of what double binds are, or as we want to set the tone for what it is for people?
Have a specific concept. I referencing, so I didn't see the Runway episode, but referencing the Barbie movie. The concept of just where the expectations that we have that we're expected to, for instance, I remember one of them that kind of hit home for me was like, you're expected to be working, a full time working mom and expected to be at your job at all times, but at the same time, you're expected to be taking care of your kids. And so that was like one that had stuck with me. I think there was numerous examples throughout that dialogue. Um, that kind of highlight that concept. And so I think that I'm on the same page as far as like what it means, but I relate it to myself and what I am experiencing currently. And I think that was like the one that spoke to me the most. But I think that it's about expectations and, you're supposed to be, doing everything, yet you can't do everything. And so all of these concepts that I think that are put on us as women to have to do, X, Y, and Z, but at the same time, that's almost impossible. So how are we supposed to live in this world where the expectations are not attainable?
Yeah, as you were talking, I did look up the definition really quickly, and it says a double bind is a dilemma in communication in which an individual receives two or more reciprocally conflicting messages. So, in your example, it was working full time and being very productive, but also being sort of the best mother that you could ever be, and as if they are totally separate entities and don't affect each other, right? So, that's the conflict. I mean, I think the other thing was that they talked about in the Project Runway theme was sort of like hard and soft. Like, how can you make a costume or an outfit that has hardness and softness to it? And so it is something where there is sort of very different, almost like polar ends, and we're given these messages, and it's just something that is really difficult to curate all at the same time. And so it is very difficult to do. And I think as women, we're constantly being put into that role. This is an article from Elle magazine, and it is actually labeled the name of this article is Here's Every Word of America Ferrer's Big Barbie Monologue. And in the article, it sort of talks about what she says. And it's so this is her in the movie. It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like we have always have to be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin. You can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but you also have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You can lead, but you can't squish other people's ideas, or I'm sorry, squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mom, but don't talk about your kids um, all the damn time. You have to be career woman, but you also have to be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane. But if you point that out, then you're accused of complaining or being bossy or mean, as we've talked about in other podcast. So I think that gives a flavor of sort of the the extreme ends. And that's where I think it's interesting as women, there was all this stuff going on in this movie. And I myself wasn't prepared for this character to just sort of sound off on that. And it like spoke to me in every single way, like as a career woman, as a mother, as a woman, beauty standards and wanting to be thin, but not too thin because then you're gaunt, or if you're healthy, or then you get plump and then you're fat. And I mean, it's like we don't even know what the standard is. I mean, we're just constantly getting conflicting messages, and it just leaves us with our head spinning and ultimately not making anybody happy, at least of it ourselves, right? I mean, do you agree with that, Alyssa?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it goes on to talk about like you're supposed to be sensitive, but not too sensitive. And like, I think that there's just so many messages that we get in society as a whole that are telling us this is how you're supposed to be, or this is what you're supposed to be attaining. But they really are, the expectations are they're unattainable. And I think that creates such a dynamic where we're not sure how to balance it all. And so we're just kind of in this double bind. I mean, I think that the term I hadn't heard before, but it makes sense. I mean, you're in this bind, it's like catch 22. You have no way to really, you know, if you put your whole efforts into I'm going back to working moms, like you put all of your efforts into work, you're neglecting your children or your family. If you put all your efforts into losing weight and then, you're considered not healthy. I think that there's just kind of these unattainable goals. And what that does is it just confuses like, what am I supposed to do? And I think that the alternative perspective is just do the best that you can. Just do, you can't have it all. I've heard that message many times. I forget, oh, I wish you know, it just kind of came to me. But like people talk about like having clean house, having, a successful job and having good relationship with your family. And I think there's other things in the mix too, but it's like you can't do all, you can't have all three all the time. So maybe, have you're successful at work and you have a good relationship, but your house is a mess. I think that's, something that sometimes we kind of have to embrace, like embrace the mess because it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be, all these expectations can't really run how you conduct yourself because you're just going to burn out and you're never going to get to that unattainable goal.
And when you said burnout, that's exactly what I was thinking of is like, what happens as a result of that? And I think what ends up happening in counseling or psychology, we talk about learned helplessness and you just sort of give up. You just figure you can't make anybody happy because you're never going to have either one of these expectations met. And so you just sort of throw in the towel and you just say whatever. And so learned helplessness is a pattern of that where you just give up basically in life. But I do think that as women, I do feel like you have to listen to your own voice and you got to figure out what is it that you want to be. And as long as you're at peace with what you want for yourself, then other people's expectations are not going to drag you down as much as if you want to please other people and other people's changing expectations of you. That is sort of a no win situation. And so, like you've said, I mean, you have to decide for yourself where do you want to be between, work and your mom balance? Where do you want to be in terms of a healthy weight for yourself? Where do you want to be in terms of the way you want to look and feel and where you want to spend most of your free time and what kind of activities? Because you cannot, I think we can all agree that we cannot all have it all. And there isn't a superwoman out there outside of in the movies. And we have to let go of that kind of concept of any kind of rigid, perfection. And I think that's the other thing that comes out of it is that, it forces perfectionistic behaviors that is also not going to lead to happiness because that takes a certain amount of crazy attention to detail that's going to just make you mad, meaning crazy with all of it at some point. And so, but how do we find, how do we get to that point where we determine what's happy, what makes happiness for us or what gives us joy with a certain particular topic. Have you found anything that works for you, Alyssa, in terms of helping you find the place that is your happy place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that finding that balance, and I think that for me, for so many years, I, really adhered to this concept that like my house had to be spotless. And I mean, I'm a full-time working mom with 3 small children, and it's not spotless. It's a hot mess sometimes. But, I have like constantly made it my goal to figure out, okay, like what routines do I need? What do I need to put in place to like have like the job and the family and the house. And like that's why I gave that example because what I found was, you know what? It's okay if I don't have like there's dishes in the sink. It's all right because maybe that's the day that I spent time with my family. Maybe that's the day that I didn't spend 4 hours cleaning and instead we went out and had like a fun outing. So I think that it's about, that balance. And somebody had said to me, "Do you want to have a happy home or a clean home?" And I was like, "I want it to be happy. Like I want everybody to, have that bond and that time together and not just be focused on, okay, everybody like I come home and everyone's got to start cleaning." I think that, that for me it was realizing that I couldn't have all of those things. And so, okay, where do I have to kind of maneuver and where do I have to change my mentality and do some shifting so that I'm not just constantly focus on the mess. Like that was consuming me because I would work all day and come home and put my purse down and immediately start cleaning. It's like, well, you know what? I have people that I want to see. My kids, my husband, I want to spend time with them. And so I had to kind of let go of that unreasonable expectation and kind of live in the chaos and be okay with that. And that's not something that happened overnight. It's just something that I finally was like, okay, I have to make peace with this. And I still fall back into, trying to clean up everything as much as I can, but I'm also recognizing that I'm only human and I can't do it all.
Yeah. The way I relate to the double bind, because all of us have our sort of trigger points or pain points. For me, it was always the bind of wanting to be a successful career person and yet knowing that I have a child and where's the balance of that? Because not only did I want to be super professional and advanced in my career, I also wanted to be the best mom I could be. And so, in so many ways, and I had long hours and I enjoyed working and I wanted to get promoted. And so, I would work extra hours to show my work effort. And yet, the more time you're away from home, the less you have the opportunity to be, quote unquote, this great mom. And so, I had to find the balance of being able to negotiate. And I think that I probably didn't find as much balance at the home life as you did with decluttering or cleaning. I'm sad to say, I think I did, probably take advantage of that situation quite a bit. But the way that I got peace with that is that I made every moment count. And so I really wanted to spend moments with my daughter enjoying each other's company. And to me, I hate to say this, you probably think my house is a mess all the time. It's a lot cleaner now that I have no children or running around and all that stuff. But, and I only had one child, but in the sense of like, that was really never that much of a priority for me. And, and so for me, it was more about, but that's not where I felt the guilt. I didn't feel guilt about the house being dirty because that's something that you have to really care about to feel bad about. For me, I felt guilty about if I ended up, as a young therapist, I carried a pager and I had to leave the house if I got paged out to a police department if there was a runaway. And then I would have to come home and I'd have to pack up my stuff and I'd have to go back out again. Or I'd be called in the middle of the night and that was going to throw off the whole day, including, drop off for childcare and all these other things. And so that's what I felt really bad about was how my work life would inject itself into my personal life when it was unpredictable. And then it sort of threw my day up and my night up for, for anybody to grab. And that's when I felt really destabilized and felt like I was losing control of things because there's nothing I could do about those things. That was not in my control. I had to respond if I was carrying the pager. And so those were, but then being able to make special moments, make time away. And it's so much easier when you have, one child versus three children or more. And so it was easier, even though it was still very challenging for me because that wasn't my mindset. That wasn't, necessarily. I was extremely happy when I was spending time with my daughter and I enjoy doing projects with her and doing things with her. But that wasn't where I usually gravitated. My usual place of comfort was to do something work related or to do something that would benefit my career, go back to school, take a class, do something like that. And so that's where the guilt was all the time. And so, well, you've talked about sort of the challenges of being a working mom and keeping the house and all of that. I brought up my example and my pain point of my whole life, which is the balance between working and mothering without some of those other things that are important too that can derail your day. And so, I mean, these are real life examples. Now, do you think that switching gears a little bit, do you think that this is something that only women find themselves in, or do you think that this is something that really, anybody can fall victim to this?
It's such a good question. I think, I mean, if I'm going back to the Barbie movie, I mean, the real push for that. I mean, I think that there was kind of I think that it highlighted that it can apply to both men and women, but I think that it's more prevalent for women, especially since you don't hear as much like if a man wants to go out and have a career, but he wants to be a good father. Like, I don't hear as much about that being a conflict for him. That, like that's kind of an expectation. Um, I think that, there's not as much of, oh, well, if he takes off time to take care of his kids or something, like, I think that there is a different viewpoint of that. Like, it's viewed as like, oh, he's, being so uh considerate of his family or taking care of the kids. But if I feel like a lot of times, and this might be a little bit more biased on my part, but like if I take time off to take care of the kids, it almost feels like, oh, well, you're not fulfilling your job duties. You're not doing what the expectations are for you. And again, that may be my own pressures put on me, not so much like the system, but I don't hear that as much. Um, I would be curious to hear what other people think. I know that we have a group of men who listen in, so I would love to hear their viewpoints as well as to whether they have experienced that. I don't think it's as prevalent, but I do think that it probably, when we talk about expectations like that, athleticism, like, they're expected to be athletic and to play to like sports, but there's lots of men who don't like sports, but that's the expectation. So, you have to know. I'm just thinking like if we're doing the same dialogue for men, like, you have to enjoy sports, which you can't talk about too much. And so I think that it definitely can apply to both genders. I think for us as women, it's much readily, easily available for us to point out. But it may apply to everybody in
Yeah,
some way.
I think so. As I asked you the question, I thought, oh, there's something that we hear. I think it's across cultures, and that is the whole masculine sensitivity issue for men. I mean, I would say what is a universal double bind for men that I've seen is men have to be a real man, but then they're also expected to be sensitive and emotional. And I think that's something that I've heard men say, if I'm too emotional, I'm considered too feminine. But if I am like not emotional at all, then like I'm a man's man, right? I'm removed from my emotions and that's a bad thing. And so like being able to find sort of that, you can't be overly masculine or, something like machismo, because you also have to be sensitive and receptive, especially if you've got a partner or you're married or you have daughters, you have to be able to toggle those both worlds. And so that's probably the most common bind that I see men in. But I also feel, agreeing with you, Alyssa, that men who are very masculine don't get hit over the head with an expectation of to be hugely sensitive. And I don't think that men who are, I don't even know what an overly sensitive man looks like, to be honest with you. I don't know what that looks like. And if that's perceived as being, something, maybe between men, that's something that they're critical of with each other. But as a woman, I enjoy men who are very much in touch with their emotions and who can have a conversation, who can express themselves and relate to women. I mean, that to me is like the perfect male friend. So I don't know how the male, like you said, men, please respond to us and help us understand this side. But I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what is the bind in that bind for a man to be overly emotional. But I do think that if you're on, just totally doing a stereotype, if you're on the football team and you're an emotional person, I'm sure you're going to be called a crybaby or something like that, or I'm not sure. But it's not something that I can relate to because it feels like for women, we could brainstorm 100 different double binds in a very short amount of time. Whereas with men, that's really the one thing I can come up with. So, I mean, I don't know. I hope we hear from some men. I think that would be good for us to get some, reality checks with men holding us accountable. But I invite that conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I think that it would be interesting. But I think that the going back to the concept of double binds, I think that it's a really challenging topic or concept to hear because I think that when we have these expectations, it's what creates a lot of stress. It's what creates a lot of conflict. It's probably, at the crux of a lot of issues for women, men included, per like, the end of this conversation. But I mean, I think that it's one of those things where we need to shine light on it and have more conversations about because without that, I think that we're just kind of going through the motions and trying, all of these things. And like I said, I was like, trying to figure out ways to find the perfect routine or the perfect way to clean or whatever. And really just like pushing myself to try to achieve something that I really couldn't. And so, I think that's something that we have to shed light on and let people know that, what, it's okay to not meet those expectations and to be okay with yourself as well.
And one thing that I also think that we have to talk about is that this kind of double bind leads to anxiety and depression. I mean, if you never feel good in your own skin because you don't know who you are and other people are dictating their expectations and you take that on, I don't, that's, and I identify with that because I've always said that in my 20s, I was a walking generalized anxiety disorder. Like I was always just, I just never knew who I am or what I stood for or what people wanted from me. And I was always failing people. And all it did was make me anxious. It just made me unhappy all the time. And it hasn't been until my 40s and 50s that I really feel like I'm more in control of that. And I feel good about who I've turned out to be and the decisions that I've made, that I'm able to let go of that. Because otherwise, I think that negative self talk tape is just constantly running in your head and it just makes, once again, doubt yourself and just chips away at your self esteem and your self image. And that's not a good place to be for anyone. And so I do think that people do need to understand the connection between, double binds that either put you into from other people's expectations or maybe expectations you have for yourself that are unattainable. And then the connection to stress, anxiety, and depression. And so there are lots of resources out there to get help and to talk to somebody through that. But I do want people to know that, it's survivable. I mean, I feel like I am in recovery from an anxiety disorder because I have set more realistic expectations for myself. And that's the way to take back control, not only from society and, people out there, but also people who are close to you and people who are in your inner circle who sometimes can be more hurtful than general society. And so you can take control back. And I encourage everybody to do that because only then will you walk your true path and become who you're really meant to be. So I don't know if there's anything more to say, Alyssa. Do you want to close us out?
I mean, I think that's a great point, and I would almost echo that as well. I think that, uh, there's so much. I think that's what I was kind of hinting at, like the idea of like reducing your stress. But I think anxiety is right up there with it too. So I think that you did a great job of ending and kind of rounding that out because that's something that we all could benefit from is just less anxiety, less stress by I don't wanna say well, I think that I mean, I guess it's accurate. Lowering your expectations. I mean, I'm not saying, like, have no expectations, but I think lowering them to a reasonable degree is appropriate and the way to go, and however that looks for each of you as you all have different situations and circumstances and maybe you're single and you have expectations for where you're supposed to be at a certain age or maybe you're an empty nester and have expectations for what that's supposed to look like. I think that we all have kind of this concept of these double binds of where we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to be doing. And it's like, you know what? It's okay to let go of some of that and really just be you. I think that's really the main focus.
Okay. Well, so from Melissa, Marie, and Joji, we're going to be signing off. And thank you so much for listening. And please, those our male counterparts that are listening, please give us some feedback on this conversation. And we invite all of our listeners to drop us a note at the deconstructed woman at gmail.com. So until next time, we're saying goodbye. Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you liked this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions? Or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.